Before we get into everything, I've been reading your comments and your DMs, and you'll have had the same questions on repeat since April of 2024. Did she take her own life? Why wasn't anyone checking on her? Was COVID involved? How does someone that beloved die alone and nobody notices for 3 whole weeks? I got you. We're answering every single one of those questions today. The real story. The autopsy. What her father said at the funeral. All of it. Because Mandisa deserved more than a headline, and her story deserves to be told right. Stay with me. Mandisa Lynn Hundley was born on October 2nd, 1976, in Citrus Heights, California, right outside Sacramento. She grew up in the church, not performing in the church, not just sitting in a pew, she was of the church. That voice, that big, room-filling, wall-shaking voice, was formed inside Sunday morning worship services before the world ever got a chance to hear it. From a young age, it was clear this was no ordinary talent. Her mother, Ruby Berryman, worked for the state of California. Her father, John Hundley, was a steady presence throughout her life, a man who would later stand at a microphone and defend his daughter's name in front of hundreds of grieving people. But we'll get there. After high school, Mandisa enrolled at American River College in Sacramento, where she studied vocal jazz. She wasn't playing around, she wasn't treating music like a hobby, she was training. From there, she transferred to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, one of the most historically significant HBCUs in America, where she studied vocal performance and sang with the legendary Fisk Jubilee Singers. She graduated in 2000 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in music. And she wasn't waiting around after graduation either. She started doing what a lot of serious vocalists do: session work, background vocal work. She sang backup for names like Sandy Patty, Trisha Yearwood, and Shania Twain. Think about that for a second. This is before American Idol, before the Grammy, before Overcomer. She was already in the room with major artists, lending her voice to their projects, staying behind the scenes, laying the groundwork. Then came 2005. Mandisa walked into an American Idol audition in Chicago, Illinois. She introduced herself simply as just Mandisa. And when she opened her mouth, everything changed. The judges were stunned. Randy Jackson, Paula Abdul, they lit up. But Simon Cowell? Simon did what Simon does. He let her advance. He gave her the golden ticket. But after she walked out of that room, he turned to the cameras and said, "And I want you to hear how cruel this was. Do we have a bigger stage this year?" He was talking about her weight. On national television. About a woman who had just sung her heart out. Mandisa didn't hear it in the room. But she saw it later when she watched the footage back. And here is where you see who Mandisa Lynn Hundley really was. Because most people, and honestly, I include myself, would have had some words for Simon Cowell. Strong words, justified words. But when Mandisa got her chance to face him directly on that Hollywood stage, she sat down, looked him in the eye, and said something nobody expected. She said, "Simon, a lot of people want me to say a lot of things to you, but this is what I want to say. Yes, you hurt me, and I cried, and it was painful. It really was. But I want you to know that I've forgiven you, and that you don't need someone to apologize in order to forgive somebody. And I figure, if Jesus could die so that all of my wrongs could be forgiven, I can certainly extend that same grace to you." Simon Cowell, the man who has humiliated people on live television for sport, went quiet. He said he was humbled. He hugged her. Ryan Seacrest later called her the woman who did the impossible. She made Simon apologize on national television. That moment became iconic, not because it went viral, but because it revealed character. That was Mandisa's character on full display. Grace under fire. Faith in action. Not performance, practice. She finished 9th on Season 5 of American Idol in 2006. And then she got to work. Her debut album, True Beauty, dropped in 2007 and earned a Grammy nomination for Best Pop and Contemporary Gospel Album. She followed that with more albums, more chart success. And then, in 2013, came Overcomer, her fifth studio album and arguably her most powerful. It won the Grammy for Best Contemporary Christian Music Album in 2014. It was the song she'd written as a prayer for her dying friend. And it became the anthem that millions of people held onto in their own darkest moments. A mother who lost her daughter at 16, a cancer patient, a teenager who thought their life had no value. Overcomer found them all. But behind the music, behind the Grammy, behind the smile, Mandisa was carrying something heavy. And 2014 was the year the weight of it all finally broke her open. Her best friend's name was Kisha. Most people called her Kisha, and she was one of the great loves of Mandisa's life in the way that only a true best friend can be. Kisha was also a background vocalist. She was pregnant with her second child when she was diagnosed with cancer. Mandisa and her entire circle prayed. They believed. And Kisha did deliver that baby boy, a healthy son named Brennan. But within about a year of his birth, Kisha went home to be with the Lord. And Mandisa, the same woman who told Simon Cowell she forgave him in front of the entire country, shattered. She said later, when she passed away, it shook the foundations underneath me. I sank into a deep pit of depression. I turned back to my old ways, which is food. I was questioning everything about the goodness of God. She stopped answering her phone. She stopped responding to texts. She didn't appear in public. She didn't show up to collect her own Grammy in 2014. That should tell you everything about where she was mentally. She won one of the highest honours in gospel music and couldn't get out of bed to receive it. She had regained all the weight she had previously lost. She'd shed 120 pounds and then gained it all back, plus 75 more pounds on top of that. She described shutting out the world completely. Not shaking her fist at God, but something she said was almost worse. She just shut down. Withdrew, isolated herself. For nearly 3 years. The people who loved her finally staged an intervention. Her friends sat her down and refused to let her disappear any further. That act of love was the turning point. In 2017, Mandisa came back. She appeared on podcasts, she gave interviews, she released her final album also titled Out of the Dark. And when she spoke to Robin Roberts on Good Morning America, she didn't sanitize what she'd been through. She admitted she had come close to taking her own life. She talked about how food had been both a comfort and a trap her entire life. She talked about how the pandemic had made the isolation worse. She was transparent in a way that most public figures never are. In 2022, she published her memoir Out of the Dark, My Journey Through the Shadows to Find God's Joy. It covered all of it. The trauma of being sexually assaulted as a teenager. The depression. The suicidal ideation. The weight struggles. The crisis of faith. She said her dream was that the book would be used in living rooms and coffee shops around the world to start honest conversations about mental health. She didn't write it to be celebrated. She wrote it to help somebody else survive what she had survived. And then in early 2024, she contracted COVID-19. Her father would later say that the illness had left her physically weakened. She had been battling it in the weeks leading up to April. And that detail matters because it is directly connected to what happened next. On April 18th, 2024, friends went to Mandisa's home in Franklin, Tennessee, a suburb just south of Nashville. What they found was devastating. Mandisa was on the floor on the left side of her bed in a state of decomposition. She had been there for approximately 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The Franklin Police Department opened an investigation immediately. The next day, a representative for Mandisa released a brief statement confirming her death, but saying they had no further details. The internet, as it always does, started filling that silence with its own conclusions. Some people assumed the worst, that she had taken her own life, given her very public history with depression and suicidal thoughts. Others were speculating about foul play. Others were pushing conspiracy theories involving vaccines. Her father, John Hundley, was not about to let any of that stand. At her celebration of life service held at Brentwood Baptist Church in late April, John Hundley stood before hundreds of people and spoke directly. He described what detectives had found. He described what he believed had happened. He said, Mandisa fell down in her bedroom. They found her on the floor. If you look from the rear of her bed, she was laying on the left side. Her phone was on the nightstand on the right side. He believed that she had collapsed, likely after COVID had already left her body weakened, and in that fallen state. She couldn't get around the bed to reach her phone, she couldn't call for help, she couldn't get up, and John Hundley was direct about the suicide rumours. He said detectives looked for any sign that she had harmed herself. There were none. None, he said. Mandisa did not harm herself. And when the official autopsy report was released on June 4th, 2024, it confirmed exactly that. Tennessee State Medical Examiner Dr. Feng Li confirmed that Mandisa Lynn Hundley died of complications from class 33 obesity. Her manner of death was listed as natural. The toxicology report found nothing abnormal. There were no signs of trauma. Her weight at the time of her death was 488 pounds. Now, I want to be careful here because I know people have feelings about how weight is discussed. Class 3 obesity, which used to be called morbid obesity, is defined as having a BMI of 40 or higher, or a BMI of 35 or higher with obesity-related health conditions. It is recognized medically as a serious, complex chronic disease. It can lead to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, respiratory failure, and a range of other conditions that, left untreated, can be fatal. Mandisa herself had spoken openly about how emotional eating had been a coping mechanism her whole life, and how the grief of losing Kisha had caused her to gain back weight she had worked so hard to lose. The COVID infection in the weeks before her death likely made things worse. A weakened body, fatigue, difficulty moving, and a phone just out of reach. That is what the evidence shows. That is what the autopsy confirmed. That is what her father chose to share publicly, not to expose his daughter, but to protect her name from lies. Okay, so let me address the questions directly, because y'all have been asking them constantly, and they deserve real answers. Did Mandisa take her own life? No, unequivocally no. The autopsy found no signs of self-harm. The police investigation found no evidence of suicide. Her father said it plainly and publicly. The medical examiner listed her manner of death as natural. I understand why people feared this. She had been that open about her darkest moments, but that openness was an act of healing, not a preview of how her story ended. Why wasn't anyone checking on her? This one is painful, and I don't think there's a clean answer. What we know is that Mandisa had a documented history of isolation. She'd gone radio silent for 3 years during her depression after Kisha died. Her circle knew she could go quiet. They likely had no way of knowing, this time, that the silence was something different. Her father indicated she had been dealing with COVID in the weeks prior, and she may have communicated with people up until a certain point, leaving her friends with no immediate reason for alarm. But the fact that 3 weeks passed before anyone physically went to her home, that's the part that has stayed with people. And it should. Did COVID cause her death? Not directly. The medical examiner did not list COVID as a cause of death. But her father's statement suggests COVID significantly weakened her body in the days before she collapsed. A body already under the strain of class 3 obesity, now further weakened by a viral infection, that combination was devastating. Why didn't she get more help sooner? That question breaks my heart, because it's the kind of question that has no simple answer when we're talking about obesity, mental health, and the way they intertwine. She did get help. She went through therapy. She had friends who intervened for her. She came back from 3 years of darkness and wrote a memoir about it. She was on the record about wanting to do better. But chronic illness, and obesity at that level is a chronic illness, doesn't always yield to willpower or good intentions alone. It's complicated. It's medical. And it doesn't stop being complicated just because somebody loves God and has a Grammy on their shelf. Is the loneliness what really killed her? I'll let you sit with that one. Here's what I keep coming back to when I think about Mandisa. She forgave Simon Cowell when she didn't have to. She came back from a 3-year depression when many people don't. She wrote a book about her suicidal thoughts because she knew somebody else needed to know they weren't alone in theirs. She sang Overcomer while she was still fighting to overcome. That's not performance. That is testimony. The tributes that came flooding in after her death, thousands of them from all over the world, said the same things in different ways. Overcomer got me through cancer. Overcomer played at my mother's funeral. Overcomer came on the radio the morning I was going to do something I couldn't take back, and I didn't do it. That is what a life of purpose looks like. Not perfection. Not a clean, no struggle, everything worked out story. A real, complicated, up and down, fought for life, offered up in service of other people. Her death sparked a broader conversation that Mandisa would have probably been glad people were finally having. About checking on your single friends, really checking on them, not just a text. About what isolation does to people, even people you think are doing fine. About the loneliness that can follow public figures home when the cameras turn off. About the fact that a woman who sang about overcoming could also be someone who needed help reaching a phone. That's not a contradiction. That's the human condition. Mandisa's father, John Hundley, said at her service, "She brought immense joy to our family and our lives, and we will miss her every day." She was 57 days away from her 48th birthday when she died. She is survived by her father John, her mother Ruby, and her brother John Hundley Jr. She went home the way she had always lived, trusting that God knew what he was doing. Even when the rest of us don't understand it. Rest in power, Mandisa Lynn Hundley. You are an overcomer in every sense of the word. And for anyone watching this right now who's in their own dark place, please call or text 988. That's the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You matter too much to disappear.